Thank you very much, and if you could just join for a moment of silent reflection. Great, thank you. And for our territorial acknowledgement, as we gather, we are reminded that Guelph is situated on treaty land that is steeped in rich Indigenous history and home to many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people today. As a city, we have a responsibility for the stewardship of the land on which we both live and work. Today, we acknowledge the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation of the Anishinaabe peoples on whose traditional territory we are meeting. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest or any general nature thereof on the items before us? Councillor McKinnon.
Thank you. On report OMC 2019-01, since I have already spent in excess of my 2019 training funds, I have pecuniary interest regarding remuneration of those additional costs.
Thank you. And I would imagine that Councillor Gawler and Councillor O'Rourke would like to say the word ditto to what Councillor McKinnon just said. Okay, duly noted. And so as I go through the polling of our any items that have consent, we'll make sure no matter what that is pulled and voted on separately, okay? Anything else? Seeing none? Okay, we are going to have a presentation, but I'd like to set the agenda before we go through the presentation, please. Confirmation of minutes. Councillor Piper, would you mind bringing that forward for us, please?
Yes, thank you. I move the minutes of July 22nd.
Great. Seconded by Councillor Alt, thank you. Anything on those minutes? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. Vote's active. Great, that's unanimous, thank you. Okay, just starting with me on page 2 of 5, let's work our way through to set the agenda. The strategic plan, let's obviously kind of pull that because it's in concert with the presentation. The procedural bylaw update, and there is a staff memo attached to that as well. We have 1, 2, so I'll go to Councillor McKinnon on that one. We already have to separate the councillor's request for the additional training. The Brant Community Hub, the tourism entity negotiation, the Centennial Pool license agreement with the Upper Grand District School Board, Councillor Piper, the revised investment strategy, and the property tax bylaw update. Seeing none, other than the ones that are being pulled, could I have someone move that consent, please? Thanks, Councillor Hoffman, seconded by Councillor O'Rourke. Anything on those? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. Vote's active, everybody. Instead of going in order, because I think this councillor additional training one is going to have really no questions or comments, it just needs to be voted on separately. If you don't mind, I'll just do that one. Is that okay with everybody? Thanks. Moved by Councillor Hoffman, seconded by Councillor Piper. Thank you. Okay, so this is the one that you 3 councillors should not be voting on. Hint, hint. Okay, vote's active. And that is done. Thank you. So we have the 2, the pool and the procedural bylaw update. Councillor McKinnon, you have asked for the procedural bylaw to be pulled. Go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, with this particular motion, there's going to be an amendment later which would indicate that I want to put forward, but the main motion itself would need to be modified to do that. So I would just like to move the recommendation up until it says from Appendix 1 of the procedural bylaw, and then full period at that point. Anything after that, and the changes to revisions in Section 3.3 and right until the end, I'm not moving that, so I'm going to move the motion up to the end of the word procedural bylaw period, which is about halfway through.
So, just follow me, just want to make sure. Would it not be easier, you're moving the recommendation at second and then you're amending it? And then we can vote on your amendment?
We could do it that way.
Would that be all right?
Doesn't matter to me.
Instead of trying to just do a whole new sort of half of one?
I don't.
Okay,
Yeah,
so the
fine.
recommendation's been moved, it's been seconded by Councillor Bell. Now,
Now
now
okay,
your
thank you.
amendment is after Appendix 1 or before?
So
Maybe
it'll-
explain your amendment to us.
Right, so it'd be, it'd be combined amendment then. The first amendment is to remove anything after the word procedural bylaw halfway through the current motion. But then in addition, I have handed to the clerks 3 additional amendments that would go with that. That's all form part of one amendment. So the first amendment is just removing half of the first recommendation, and on the screen is the second one. This really addresses the electronic devices. And so this is seconded by Councillor Goller, and I'll just speak to it briefly. So what it's doing is in number 1, we're going to talk about 4.66 and 3.3. That's just specifically talking about electronic devices and closed meetings. And then in number 2, when it's talking about 3.3, it changes to indicate that you need to put on both open and closed meetings, you need to have all your devices on inaudible, so no beeps or chimes or anything at either the closed or the open meetings. And then in section 3 is specific to broadcasting, recording, and distributing or publishing audio and video that is prohibited for both the closed and open meeting, and in addition, no photographs of closed meetings. And so this is to allow us to have photographs of staff recognitions, of awards, so we can still take photographs in this room during open meetings, but not during closed meetings. There's no reason for that. So this, in totality, the one amendment on the main recommendation, and then these 3 forms a totality of my amendment in order so we can move forward with having proper electronic meeting management as well as access to electronic devices for the purpose on which they were designed. Thanks.
Okay, I see a hand go up, Councillor Alt first, and then I'd like to try to narrow it down.
Thank you, Mayor
Let's vote on
Guthrie.
this.
As in the meeting of Committee of the Whole, I'll be speaking against this and voting against this. This particular motion and the amendment that has been presented is not housekeeping, but is actually something that does require us to consider very significantly what security issues might be there. And with all due respect to staff, this is something where we should actually be engaging security experts. There's a significant difference between a projection device, which would allow us to see pictures as per what Councillor McKinnon has stated, and having electronic devices that could potentially be recording and reporting on what is going on in closed session, not just from the members, and no disrespect for staff here, but I interpret members in this meeting members of council, but from anybody in the room actually picking anything up. And as we have had some concerns about security in the past, I can't support this at this point. We do not have a comprehensive report on it. And I think it's actually repugnant to some of what we have to do in our closed meetings, and that includes considering issues of land acquisition and dispersal, and issues pertaining to personnel. I believe we need to keep that as secure as possible. And this particular amendment does not support that.
Councillor O'Rourke?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, may I ask a question of the clerk? So in our electronic agenda management, is that on the same platform as some of our other things? Is that considered secure? My concern around this is that if we're taking notes and we're doing everything electronically, we go in a close and then we can't access those notes. So is the electronic agenda management secure?
Thank you, Councillor O'Rourke, and through you, Mr. Mayor. What I'll do is I'll perhaps give a little bit of context before I answer that question. Councillor McKinnon's motion was circulated to us and we reviewed it. It actually, we are in support of the motion, and the rationale is that as the motion is on the agenda, no electronic devices are permitted. So despite, I think, Councillor McKinnon's effort to sort of explain the rationale from capturing video and photographs and that kind of thing, and the rationale and the benefit for his motion, the true benefit for us is that without something like this, you won't be able to go into a meeting, this meeting or a closed meeting, with an electronic device and let us empower you through the use of the electronic agenda software when it comes. So we need something like this. We need this to be addressed. We absolutely need wording like this to be tabled tonight. The only other time we're going to be discussing a procedural bylaw, unless there's direction from council, is going to be at the end of next year as part of that midterm governance review that you heard me discuss at Committee of the Whole. To answer your question about security, yes, the platform is secure. The agenda solution is completely secure. It has end-to-end encryption on the confidential components that we'll distribute through it. And actually, it will add a level and a rigor to the security that we would want out of a closed meeting process, which is to say we'll have an audit trail that we can track and those type of things. So in short, we do need some wording to this effect to be included in the bylaw. With this in there, we would be very limited in implementing it. We had it in initially, and then with the motions that had happened at Committee of the Whole, those sections were removed. Does that give you some context?
I just want to go back to Councillor Altus as a follow-up question.
And thank you. I appreciate staff's response on that. I do recognize that, in fact, our system is secure. The issue that I have is with members bringing their devices into that particular chamber. Those devices are not necessarily secure, and that's my issue. As a consequence, I do not believe that this particular amendment does what Councillor McKinnon suggests, but rather makes our closed sessions potentially at risk of being a little more open than what we would like them to be. Because it clearly says members shall use electronic device. We're talking about members having them in there, and they're not on our system. They can be broadcast any which way you want.
Just out of curiosity and for clarity, would you like to, can you respond to that? Not to have pitting one against the other. I just wouldn't mind the clerk explaining the fears that maybe are out there. Is there anything that you can add to that? And if not, that's fine.
No, thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Mayor, and through you to Councillor Alt. There is certainly some validity to where Councillor Alt is coming from. The challenge we have is we know that members of council, for example, in the open session right now, when there's a vote that's taken, you will sometimes snap a photo of that vote that's on the screen so that you can message that out to constituents immediately. We understand that. We understand that that there may be instances where there are photographs being taken of a staff presentation or a community award, and members of council will want to use a device to photograph that or record it. I believe that's the intent, and when we looked at these, that's certainly the intent. Ultimately, it will be up to the chair to police the proper and improper use within the context of whatever's approved tonight, as it relates to what's acceptable and not in open or closed meeting. We would prefer personally that there would be no photographs permitted, because the challenge when you take a picture of a photograph of, for example, a vote screen is you may have a pink sheet lying on the desk. That may be inadvertently captured. You may be capturing personal information that's around your workspaces. These spaces here for the time you're in a meeting are a workspace, and there may or may not be sensitive material that's around that. But ultimately, we recognize that that's the way members of council use their devices to engage with constituents. It's part of what you do in these meetings. And so we're not trying to limit that. We're just trying to put some structure and parameter around that. And ultimately, again, the policing of that would be through the chair.
So just as a follow-up to that, if you don't mind, Council, thank you for the opportunity. Is there a meet in the middle here, sort of like where a lot of us for the access of the e-agenda, it would be like on our laptops, right, or on the tablets that we have, which is our work with a keyboard tablets. And then there's some degree of trepidation, as outlined by Councillor Alt, in regards to sort of the cell phone type of stuff. Is there a meet in the middle here? And I'm sorry I'm doing this on the fly, but is there a meet in the middle here where the cell phones can sort of still be left out, but our workstations can still be used for the e-agenda to allow us that opportunity to do our work? And as a little bit of an add-on to that, again, on the fly, I'm just sorry I didn't give you a heads up on this because I'm just thinking this through. Is there validity to actually the e-agenda being more secure than pink sheets kind of flying around all over the place? Does clerks view the e-agenda closed session documents on our workstations actually in maybe a more secure way than the pink sheets?
To you, Mr. Mayor, yes, we certainly would view the electronic agenda system as going to be more secure. Challenge with that is you will use it on the city-provided devices, whether that's the iPads or the Surfaces that you've been provided. But the reality, too, is you can use, and the beauty of the technology that we're implementing is you could view an agenda from your phone if you wanted to. And so then if we limit it to just the tablets or the Surfaces, we're then defining specific devices. We're putting parameters around specific devices. We're talking about laptops and not cell phones, and that causes problems. So That's one thing that I would say. The one permutation, and I think Councillor McKinnon would be quite all right with me saying this, because we had open discussions about it. Sure. We talked back and forth when he shared the motions with myself and my staff about limiting the distribution of photographs in the open chambers. Because again, our concern was that if you snap a picture of a vote screen, you may inadvertently capture personal information. And so obviously it's Councillor McKinnon's motion to move. This is the motion that he tabled, and so that's what has been landed on.
I did see your hand, and then back to you, Councillor Hall. Okay, and good discussion, by the way. This is good to flush it out a little bit, so go ahead, Councillor McKinnon.
Thank you, through Mr. Mayor. Regarding any of the concern about security and whatnot, so we already have a very rigorous code of conduct regarding secret information. So if I wanted to leak information, I could record it, and then I'd leave myself open to someone knowing where the source of the recording is, or I can just write everything down and then give it to someone, a blogger or whatever, my mom. I can give it to anyone. So we are bound by something far higher than this electronic device system. To imply that electronic devices are the only way to distribute private information is just a fallacy that I'm not willing to support. Anything regarding the code of conduct of if I took a picture of a vote screen and had some scribbled notes here from that Dominique had written down that was private, and I saw it and distributed that, well, I'm breaking the code of conduct about treating respect with other members around the horseshoe. And so we already have very, very strong rules governing all this. Quite frankly, we can talk to members of the press about stuff that happens in closed meeting at any time and break our confidentiality agreements. We don't need electronic devices. But what this allows us to do is use electronic devices as if it is actually 2019 and moving forward from there. So I see no reason why this shouldn't receive unanimous support. Thanks.
Okay. Councillor Alt, we'll back to you, and then Councillor
Thank
Gordon.
you. Well, it certainly won't receive unanimous support. We are certainly bound by ethical principles, and I do not disagree with that. However, we're also bound by the notion that on the streets, if a child is crossing the streets, we will stop. We also have regulations and safeguards like stop signs. And in fact, what I'm arguing is that this is a safeguard that goes beyond a code of ethics, and we need to recognize that sometimes these are the kinds of safeguards that must be put in place, because it is not just we as a council that must be assured that there are not leaks in a closed meeting. There is the public that must be assured as well. And in particular, I would have to say that when it is dealing with issues such as personnel or issues requiring property being addressed, that those issues are absolutely paramount. So consequently, not only do I want to be bound by a code of ethics, I actually want to have some safeguards installed as well.
Thank you, Councillor Alt. Councillor Gordon, and then I'll go to Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A question for the clerk. Sorry. I think I need, before my vote on this, I need clarity on, in reading this, what's actually different than what exists now. It's a subtle difference, right?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Gordon. What's different now is there's two sections in there that in the bylaws it's written now that would prohibit the use of electronic devices in certain situations. The reality is we're moving to a position with the electronic agenda that's coming in the new year where you will need to use electronic devices. At Committee of the Whole, when the staff recommendations were amended, I believe, I don't know for sure, but I mean obviously it was the intent of committee to do this, but those sections were removed, which is to say it would prohibit the use of electronic devices. And so regardless of if Councillor McKinnon had brought this forward, we would have been highlighting, and in the memo we kind of allude to it, that we would need to have those things put back in if the electronic agenda system that we purchased was going to be used for the intended audience it was for.
Councillor Bell?
Thank you. I was just going to mention that I don't think I'll be supporting the amendment. I see the reasons, but I think I like staff's position and the way it's written better. It's a little bit safer, and that's it.
Okay, so how about I call the vote on the amendment, okay? Votes active. Okay, and that passes. And then the main motion as, oh, I'm sorry, Councillor, my apologies, go ahead.
So I have another amendment. So this is based on the staff memo that came out to us clarifying the appointment of members of the public to advisory committees, and I would like that to actually remain the same in camera. I understand that we'll still see their resumes in camera, but that the recommended public people will be on an agenda, and that we can still go in camera, but if you go in camera and you come out and you change any of those names, there's going to be a lot of questions, or delete somebody, or something like that. So the motion I have is that the process for appointments of members of the public to advisory committees, local boards, agencies, commissions, and associations remain the same as we've always done.
Okay, it's been seconded by Councillor. Before, would you mind? Would it be okay with you if we just tabled that? Let me call the motion as amended of what we just talked about, and then that's going to be a new motion.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So I'll go right back to you and seconded by Councillor Billings, but I just want to call the vote on this section, and then, okay? So I'm going to the main motion as amended, and that's, I'm calling that vote now, and that's there. Okay, and then, so that passes, and now, I don't need to go back to you, but moved by Councillor Downer, seconded by Councillor Billings, to leave the sort of committee resume application as is, as status quo. Status quo.
I've got the motion written out.
And here is some wording. That the current process of having staff recommended appointees to
Okay.
the city advisory committees, local board
Where'd that
agencies,
come
commissions, associations.
Anyway, I wrote one up, so,
Oh,
but you know what, this is exactly this.
Is that okay?
It's similar, so it's very much the same, so that would work, yep.
okay. Okay, I'm going to call the vote on this one, okay?
No.
Votes active, everybody?
Did that one.
Okay, and that passes. Anything else on this one? If not, I think we're good to go. Okay, we're good to go. Councillor Salisbury, before I go on the next agenda, was there anything on this one you wanted to bring up at this time? I thought maybe you had mentioned it, but and if I'm putting you on the spot, it's totally
No,
fine.
that is fine.
It's just I don't want to go to the next agenda item. and
I've
miss
had
this.
some conversations with our clerk. I don't have a motion or an amendment, but I did want to ask a question with regards to notice of motion and whether we would be able to get a range of alternatives with regards to the process when it comes back, looking at ways that councillors can bring notices of motion through the process promptly and effectively.
So just a little bit of further context, thank you, Councillor Salisbury, is that in the memo that was attached, it addressed sort of the notice of motion issue, and in that memo, it stated that, hey, council, if you want to look at other options, you got to direct us to go look at that, and then we can come back, next year or during that midterm with some of those options. So am I saying anything out of place, Mr.
No,
Clerk?
and through you, Mr. Mayor,
You
the
go
only thing
ahead.
I would add is, so you can, council tonight can choose to give direction to that effect, or alternatively, we are going to be touching base with members of council in the lead up to that mid-year governance review. And so if there is an interest from Councillor Salisbury to sort of give us some feedback in that regard, and we hear from members of council that's an area that you wish to have addressed in the bylaw, then we can come back with some options as part of that end of year 2020 is when we're targeting to come back, so that committee and council can consider that.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, then to our clerk, would it then, if it is something that I've spoken with a number of councillors, I think it is important that we review our notice of motion process, and I know that the memo did not. I wonder, would it be advisable then tonight to put forward a motion that staff review the notice of motion procedure and report back with options or alternatives for that, or really is it just sort of the heads up sufficient?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's completely your choice. The only ask that I would graciously request is that you tag it to that mid-year.
Yeah, absolutely.
review.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
if it's your choice, Councillor, you're by all means, and you've got a seconder, then
You know what? I believe there'd be support for that. I also don't think it would be necessary if we've already had this conversation But you know what? Why don't I put a motion on the floor then, just to see, from that, and that would be that to refer the notice of motion procedure to the work plan, to have staff come back with options and alternatives for consideration. And I have not written that down.
Would anyone like to second that? Councillor Goller? Okay. Just as it's kind of getting written there, I cannot agree anymore with Councillor Salisbury, and we've talked. It's cumbersome, it's too long, and we cannot respond to our constituents in a timely manner. And I've said it out loud before, the Route 3 issue that Councillor Alt and Councillor Hoffman went through, and hey, I didn't vote for that, but the whole rigmarole and hurdles that they had to go through, and it delays the opportunity for us as the representatives of the city and or our wards to be able to respond in that timely manner to people that are having issues. And so it really needs to be looked at. I'm actually disappointed that we don't have a change now. I'm disappointed that we have to wait until next year to even have this as an option. But I implore my colleagues around this horseshoe to please let's find a different way than what it is right now, because it is not responsive to the needs of our constituents, and that there should be some kind of middle ground between the way it was and sort of between the way it is right now. And I'm hoping that we can land collectively on something when this comes back on a different option. Some comments on that? I got Councillor Hoffman first, then Councillor Alt.
Yes, thank you, through you, America 3. So in the staff memo, it refers to a governance review, and that's going to happen in 2020. So approximately when in 2020 might be helpful, because we're already into September. So if the governance review is coming back in February or March, I don't really see the point of changing up the work plan or the timing of the governance review. So could Mr. O'Brien please respond to the governance review? When?
The clerk already mentioned that it's the end of 2020. I think the clerk had mentioned, though, that leading up to the end of 2020, the clerk would obviously talk with us and see if there's any kind of, ideas and things, so that surveys maybe, and make sure we do the surveys, please, that we can at least help to inform whatever the recommendations would be in the late fall, late end of the year of 2020. So it's nothing's happening in January, February that you just mentioned in your question.
I didn't hear the part about the end, and in the report it just speaks to part of the 2020 governance review. It doesn't stipulate when that would be. So is it my understanding, I just want to understand the notice of motion process, this would be my second question. The only time it really becomes a notice of motion is when the chair of the committee doesn't allow the councillor to bring something forward on an agenda. And I feel strongly that's not a chair's role to prevent important constituents' issues coming before council and coming to committee. So I don't think that it'd be great if we can do a governance review, but I think perhaps when we do our chair training, which I've heard that we're going to be doing in the very near future, is perhaps we could talk about a better process or a better way for chairs to manage that process, because as I mentioned, I don't believe that it's the chair's role to not allow something to come forward.
And just on that, because you are correct on everything you just said, but the flip is also correct. So currently the way it works is the chair and the deputy CAO of that department, they have to agree. So even if the chair agreed with you, but the deputy CAO said no, then you'd still have to go through the notice of motion. So it's not all resting on the chair. So it's either the chair or the deputy CAO. Okay? Councillor, you did have your hand up on this one.
Actually, I think Councillor Hoffman probably summed up my concerns quite well. Thank you.
Councillor Salisbury, thank you very much for bringing that forward. I really appreciate it. And hopefully we can find something that's a good meet in the middle for everybody by the end of next year. and/or sooner. Okay, I'll call the vote. Vote's active, everybody. Okay, and that passes. Thank you. All right, moving right along. Got the procedural bylaw done. That was good. What was the other one? Centennial Pool. Councillor Piper.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I brought this forward so I have an opportunity to voice my vote against the recommendation. I've heard a lot from constituents in Ward 5 over the last many weeks since it became public that this recommendation to close the pool was in play. A lot of concern about the loss of a central recreation facility, that we have not yet completed our Parks and Rec master plan that would provide the business case for the closure. And I worry that down to 2 pools in a city where if one of those pools was closed for repairs, we would be down to 1 pool. So I'm going to be voting against the recommendation. This is a highly valued facility in our community. It was part of a building project for a recreation center in this, what was then the southern fringe of the city, including an arena and a high school and a pool. I think we send a message to the community when we're building recreation facilities next to a high school, which we plan to do in the South End in the future, that we will maintain those facilities, and I think $1.2 million. Given that we're a land of lakes and rivers, all children in Guelph should learn to swim, and I think it's important that we maintain this facility. So I'm going to be voting against the motion.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate that. Obviously, being especially the Ward 5 councillor, I can understand that position. Councillor Downer.
Thank you. I said a lot last week about this issue, so I don't want to say too much more other than, but I have the question that I also do not support the closing of it from what we're hearing from our constituents. It's inaccessible, easily walkable to a lot of communities in Ward 5, particularly in the Janefield-Scottsdale area, which has a high vulnerable population within it, which don't have access to easy transport to other areas. But I will have a follow-up motion, Mr. Mayor, after the main motion, just in regards to this. But through you to staff, now I've heard through the library debate that and the South End Rec Center debate, that or some of the discussion is that the reason we're closing down, and it was in the feasibility study, the Centennial and possibly Exhibition Arena, is so that we can fund the operations in the South End Rec Center. And so I want to clear the air around that and hear what you have to say.
Sure, through the Mayor to Councillor Downer. So certainly in the feasibility study in 2014 that talked about the needs assessment, it does mention that when the South End Community Centre is opened, that would then coincide with the end of the life cycle of Centennial Pool and likely Exhibition Arena. So we were quite clear on that feasibility study in 2014, but the two are not, it is not if A, then B. The Centennial Pool recommendation for the closure is because it's at the end of the life cycle, and it is not a presumption that the funds are therefore needed to transfer to the South End. Those are two mutually exclusive projects. The feasibility study in 2014, though, speaks to the number of aquatics facilities we need in Guelph, and it certainly did speak to the fact that the Centennial Pool would be offline by the time South End was opened. So I think that may be where
2023 for Centennial Pool to think I do.
Okay, go ahead, Councillor.
Maybe that's into revamp and reuse an asset than to destroy it. So I won't be supporting the closure.
Did I see another hand go up over here? Councillor Salisbury, and then Council, I'm just giving you the heads up. I'm going to be moving a motion to go in camera for a moment on this subject. So go ahead, Councillor Salisbury.
Just a question for our staff with regards to the direction of debate, and I was looking for the report. My understanding is that the report before council was with regards to the, what I will refer to as premature closure of this facility, not its, not the fact that it will close. And so what I'm trying to wrap my head around is that should the motion to not support that follow through, is that putting this pool on our facilities list for an indefinite period of time, or does it really just take us back to its original due date, which I think was a couple of years, and if I could just get clarity on that, that'd be great.
So through the Mayor to Councillor Salisbury, we would need to go back and look at what it would take both in terms of timelines for the closure of the facility. Certainly we are on borrowed time now with this facility, and we're not sure how much longer we will be able to keep it open without the significant repairs. And so we would need to go back and come back to you on that, on what the implications of that were if the motion were to fail. Just to be clear, it is the school board's asset, not ours. And so we would also need to go back and work with them on that as well, because they've been part of and in agreement with this motion coming forward. So we would need time to work with them.
No, I appreciate that. And Councillor Piper has shown me the original motion, which spoke to the termination of the Centennial Pool license agreement for January 4, 2020. And so what I wanted to get clarity on, and perhaps this is a procedural question, if this a motion or amendment that's been being floated around to not execute this agreement, would that then default to the pool would be closing on January 4th, 2020 as per the existing agreement, or would this push it into something else?
Yeah, so I have not been made aware. I was not given a call from Councillor Downer at all about a heads up about anything else that's coming forward. So I can't answer that, but maybe staff knows what's coming forward. I'm in the dark. Yeah. Because I don't know, Councillor Salisbury, are you referencing what Councillor Downer's?
I'd love any clarification from any source just to understand what it is, what the context and the ramifications of this debate and conversation is.
Okay, maybe staff know.
I think just to clarify, Councillor Salisbury is asking simply if this motion were to fail. He's not referring to the other motion that Councillor Downer may bring forward. So I think we can respond to what would happen if this motion were to fail, which is very, very separate from any other motions, if that's correct.
So go ahead,
yeah,
Heather.
Sorry, then, through the chair to Councillor Salisbury. The fall session is well booked and underway, and that's why we have kept the date to finish out the fall session to January 4th, 2020. In the event this fails, we would have to go back to through the capital budget process and determine which projects would be realigned to find the money to allow this renovation to occur in a timely fashion. Regardless of when that would happen, we would be looking at a significant closure of this facility to complete that work.
Just so that I'm clear, Mr. Mayor, it was my understanding that the Centennial Pool was scheduled to be closed at a future date, that staff came to us and said that future date is now today. If this motion were to fail, then what is that future date that it would default back to? In other words, so
the end of through the chair to Councillor Salisbury, end of March 2021 is the end of the lease date.
Thank you. And so my question for my colleagues would be, is that the intent of this motion then to push that to that date, or to push it to an indefinite maintaining the asset? And maybe that speaks to a forthcoming motion, so.
Do you want me to respond?
Again, I have no knowledge of I don't know if what's coming is reflective of now. So my apologies, I just don't know if you've shared something. I just. Oh, okay. All right, everyone. Okay. Let's not all jump in the deep end here. Yeah, that was a pool joke. Okay. I have a question. I have to go on camera for it. So, well, it's up to you guys if you allow it. So it's section 2392F, solicitor client privilege, but I just want to give some parameters around it, just so that the right staff come in the room. It is in regards to the contractual agreement, leasing agreement, whatnot between the Upper Granda School Board and us. So that's the parameters around why I need to go in camera. Yeah, and getting that legal advice in regards to that, okay? So, could someone move that for me? Councillor Alt, seconded by Councillor Guller. Any questions on that? Okay, I'm going to call the vote. Vote's active. And I promise to be quick. One more vote, please. One more vote. It's unanimous. Thank you. We'll be right back. All right, thank you very much. I did promise that would be quick. I thought that was pretty quick. So this is a follow-up. Obviously, I asked a question in regards to needing some solicitor information in regards to contractual agreements between the city and the Upper Grand District School Board. Council received that information, and thank you to staff for that. That's all that happened back there. Okay, and we're back, and I didn't have anyone else talking about this, and so I have the no, I don't think I have the motion on the floor yet. The recommendation from staff. So would someone like to at least move that for us? Councillor Hofflin is moving it. Councillor Alt is seconding that. Okay, so I'm going to call the. We are calling the vote on what came out of committee of the whole. So the staff recommendation. Okay. You okay? Okay. And I made my comments known at committee of the whole in regards to this, so I'll call the vote. One more to vote, I've been told. Okay, and that passes. And then, Councillor Downer, you have a follow-up.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. So at the last meeting, I said that I was concerned about the equitable distribution of recreational facilities in the inner part of the city or across the city, and that should be an important component of the upcoming Parks and Rec Master Plan update. So I did, and I said I would be working with staff. So I did have talked to staff, and the motion I have is that staff consider the equitable distribution of recreation facilities across the city during the Parks and Recreation Master Plan update. And this doesn't necessarily mean whole recreational facilities, but just that need. I mean, the feasibility study for the South End went from Stone Road south, and we need to be looking at the whole city when we are identifying where these new facilities may be needed, because we've got, Exhibition Park and Centennial Arenas probably coming up for consideration or not. We'll see what happens. So I think it's an important thing for staff to consider when you look at all the other values the city has around complete communities, walkable, being able to easily access all our recreational facilities, whether they're on main transit routes and those types of things as well. So I need a seconder.
Councillor Alt has indicated that he would second that. Okay, and I'll call the vote on that. Okay, it's active for everybody. That's unanimous. Thank you, Councillor Downer. Okay, we're moving right along. We are at the presentation with our City of Guelph Strategic Plan 2019 to 23. There was a little bit of a update for staff memo attached, and we're looking forward to this presentation and hopefully a positive outcome of a vote here. So I'll turn it over to our CAO to start things off.
So good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. We're thrilled to present to you with the city's final strategic plan, Guelph Future Ready, and we're also looking forward to that positive outcome with you this evening. As you know, our strategic plan is the blueprint for the city to achieve aspects of Guelph's community vision that fall within our collective responsibility. The plan which you help create will guide you in making decisions and provide staff with clear direction as we work together over the coming years. Earlier this month, we presented the draft version for your consideration and discussion, and since then, we haven't changed much, and that's a good thing. We've incorporated your feedback by refining some of the language within the priorities. However, the priorities themselves have remained the same. On screen and before you is the final strategic plan. The strategic plan marks a shift for the city. It builds on decisions made by council thus far and reflects work already underway. It also offers us room to adapt to the changing needs of our community as we move through less certain times. When creating Guelph's community plan, the community shared with us what they want in this city and what is important to them, their families and businesses, and what draws them to Guelph. Armed with that knowledge, council and staff developed a strategic plan that looks at what we can do to support the community's vision. That strategic plan builds a stronger connection between council directions, employees, and community goals. It ensures that we're all working together towards a common future. To get us there, we'll align our work plans, multi-year budgets, and annual performance reports. This alignment will make it easier for you to make decisions throughout the year. Through the plan and subsequent action plans that will increase transparency and accountability and provide greater clarity to help us focus on getting the results we are all looking for. As you know, our staff are strategic thinkers who thrive on innovation and improving our work in support of the community. This is one area that we've been working to build on. And you'll recall on September 3rd, we recognized Jade Surgener and our Manager of Financial Reporting and Accounting for receiving her Black Belt Six Sigma certification. So with that knowledge and tools and the techniques she's learned, Jade will lead our newly formed Continuous Improvement Office, which will support the work of the strategic plan. So you can see that actions are in place already, and we're leveraging the smart employees that we have here at City Hall to do greater in-depth work. And so through the strat plan, we'll also continue to build on a stronger innovation and improvement culture, one that includes improved employee engagement and improved customer service experience. Guelph Future Ready is a strategic plan. It must provide enough direction to guide us over the next few years and helps you as council make decisions. It also lets us know where we should be focusing our efforts so that we can make choices at a tactical level. That is why we've now included a definitive list of tactical actions. And as Ms. Smith noted earlier this month, there must be some wiggle room or flexibility built into our strategic thinking so that we can adjust our actions as things change and new opportunities arise. Once approved, staff will begin to work on these tactical options, and we will begin to develop a set of action plans that will present clear, smart objectives and options for achieving the directions laid out in the strategic plan. We will be considering the implications of advocacy work that is underway or may be required, what each option means for the budget, what technology we may need to acquire or build to support options, and what talent we have, will grow, or need to bring in to ensure we can deliver, and what level and type of engagement is needed with stakeholders in the community. Our goal is not only to achieve the directions of the strategic plan, but to enable and drive innovation and continuous improvement within our organization. Throughout the development of the action plans, Council will continue to play a key role, as you always do. You will help shape implementation planning by setting SMART goals and objectives, determining metrics and milestones, and approving the action plans. The service area chairs will work with the executive team to provide input for staff, to ensure alignment to committee agendas. To oversee the development of the plans themselves, we have put in place co-leads. And assigning co-leads and the working teams, we're doing things a little differently. We're going to break down some silos to share in our collective knowledge. Thank you, Mr. Clerk. I'm making a mental note of that. We're breaking down silos to share our collective knowledge and cultivate an innovative thinking. In a few cases, the co-lead may be working on a priority that is a little outside of their traditional job responsibilities. Staff will also form the working teams have been chosen based on their skills and their leadership potential rather than the department they work in. We've also ensured that there was a diversity across all the teams. Investing in our staff, developing talent for tomorrow, and giving staff opportunities to grow supports our new corporate value of inclusion. It also aligns with the directions in the strategic plan and supports a culture of innovation. This slide visually shows you how it all fits together. Again, Council as a whole will shape implementation planning at various points throughout the plan. You'll see that there's two additional groups we haven't talked yet about. On the right, we have the implementation support team, and the team will support the development and rollout of the action plans to the organization and the community. On the left, we have consultancy support. We anticipate needing to bring in additional expertise to support staff and our working teams throughout the development of the plans from time to time. This evening, we'll take a moment to recognize the work that has gone into building the strategic plan together. Council and staff have dedicated hours, as you know, to attend meetings, provide input, draft, revise, and refine the plan to get us here tonight. So a big thank you to everyone involved, including Council. Tomorrow morning, our work will shift to action. We will move forward with the priority area working groups and action plans, setting into place the resources and supports needed to move these forward. Given the short timeline, we have started some of the work already. You heard a little earlier about the Continuous Improvement Office. But aside from the action plan, staff will dive into the priorities and corporate values, exploring how the work aligns to these elements and how they can put the strategic plan into action. This won't happen overnight, of course. It will take some time to understand and integrate the strategic plan into our work. However, we are excited, and I mean we, the royal we, all of us, are excited and ready to begin that work tomorrow. Through the remainder of the year and into the start of 2020, the working teams will be researching and setting goals. They will then move into the proposal development, which will include various options. And as you see on the timeline, well, it is a little difficult to see, but as you can imagine or see on that timeline, we'll be working with the service area chairs and engaging with the stakeholders throughout the process. While not explicit on this slide, Council as a whole will be involved throughout the development of the action plans. Your direction and insight will be important for staff as they research and explore options for consideration. And then finally, the plans will be presented to Council in Q2 2020. Earlier in this month, we dove into each of the priority areas, so tonight I'm going to quickly acknowledge our priorities and highlight the respective co-leads so that you have a good sense of the folks behind the scenes. And most of these folks are here with us tonight, and as I said, the level of excitement is high, and we're excited to begin the work on these action plans. So powering our future through growing our economy, the co-leads are Helen Lofton and Dana Evans. And sustaining our future by sustaining our environment, the co-leads on this particular one are Arnti Velko and, of course, Todd Salter, our General Manager of Planning. Navigating our future through a connected transportation network, our co-leads are Keely Dedman and Raman Giras from Guelph Transit. Ms. Dedman will temporarily fill this role as a co-lead until the new General Manager, her replacement, is found. And working together for a future by modernizing our government, the co-leads are Stephen O'Brien, our City Clerk, maybe not after tonight with his shenanigans with the technology, but Sasha Enwechter as well as our Information Technology Lead. And then building our future as a welcoming and complete community, the co-leads are Jennifer Rose and Stephen Dewar. So you see there's a few folks that normally might not typically work together, and we want to get that sense of how we do it together. So high tides raise all boats, and it's an important step for us to make sure that we've got the innovation happening across the entire organization. And as I said to you earlier this month, I hope you'll see the possibilities this plan presents for us today and in the coming years. Staff and the executive team are ready to move forward to work together for an inclusive, connected, and prosperous city where we look after each other and our environment. We're looking forward to working with Council to move this plan into action. So before you, Mr. Mayor and Council, are the three recommendations for your consideration. Thanks very much.
Great, and thank you very, very much, Scott. Really appreciate it. And all the staff. Just before I go to council, you know, it was, you know, you show us the timeline and everything, but there's so much more that goes in behind it, and so, and we really, I know for myself and others, we really, you know, we really dove into this and asking questions of clarity over and over again, and. Because this is a big moment for us as a council and a team moving into this term, and I must say just excellent work. And you know even the branding, Guelph Future Ready. I mean this is great stuff. And I must say that I'll give some credit to Councillor Hofflin here. You know, just the way it's worded, the way it's written, you know, is something that our constituents can pick up and can understand and can get behind as well, because as much as it's a strategic plan developed by council, you know, responding to those action steps to support what we have in our hand tonight. It's a good flow of what's trans. So really do thank you, and thank you, council, for allowing me just a little bit of some open remarks there. Is there any direct questions on the document at all, or any comments? Let me just ask if there's any questions at this time. If there's no questions, that's good. Councillor Hofflin?
The strategic plan actions in place to be able to support in the process of the 2020 budget, because this won't be coming back until later in 2020. So we'll be through the 2020 budget. So the work that we are doing here will not apply to the 2020 budget, but rather the 2021 budget. Would that be correct, Mr. Stewart?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Hofflin, and let me just say in a general way to stay out of the weeds tonight, we haven't done this in isolation. So we've worked on this with you throughout the summer and into the fall, and as we prepared the budget, we've had an eye on this getting approved. So there will be some framework that will be in place in this budget. You may see some things in here that if there's things that are early wins, we'll get to them as soon as we can. Mostly it'll be sort of to a future year. But we're organizing ourselves now, so how will it work? What are the things that we're up to today? And how does it reflect the strategic plan that's about to be approved? So we're having that discussion with staff. I mean, obviously, you see all the staff here this evening. We've got co-leads set up. That didn't happen this afternoon. So there is some preparatory work that we've done. So you'll see some outcomes in this budget, and you'll see future outcomes, very specifically when we bring you the big action plans in the tactical moments.
Thank you very much for that. I really must say I appreciate the team approach to this strat plan, the co-leads and the chairs that we haven't done in the past, and I think it's very important. I appreciate the changes that were made. I just have one more question around, I believe you called it the Continuous Improvement Office. I know it's Jade and she's an existing employee, but is that just a shift?
That's through you, Mr. Mayor. No, Jade will continue to report to Tara Baker because that's where we want some of the action to be on the financial side, and of course report up through your DCO and corporate services. So we are spreading the wealth across the entire organization so that this work gets in all of our DNA. And then the Continuous Improvement Office, there is 2 positions in there. We're currently working on savings, and we'll see if there's a third, but there's 2 positions there now. And that's the kind of activities that we need the effort to bring forward so that we'll be able to identify, so how many sort of reviews can happen in any given year. So on day 1, I don't have an answer to that, but we'll make sure that we can continue to keep up with Tara and Jade as they lead this part of the organization.
Thank you.
Great. So how about comments then? Any comments at all before I call the vote? Councillor Bell and then Councillor O'Rourke.
Thank you. So I was quite pleased with the outcome of our first session on the strategic planning process, where city councillors had input and created what I thought were four pillars for our strategic plan, which was transit and active transportation, environment and climate change, housing and homelessness, and lastly, manage our money and budget properly. So I was hoping that that would be the focus of our strategic plan. However, I don't see that in the actual document. Seems to drift off, and it's not as succinct as we were in our comments. So and those were the same sort of directions that we had from the previous term of council in our council shared agenda. So I'm not going to vote for the strategic plan because I don't think that the process concluded properly. I think there was not enough listening to city council and too much influence from staff.
And Councillor O'Rourke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I was going to say I'm quite happy with this end results. I see the fiscal responsibility outlined in one of those 5 objectives. I think the language has changed a little bit, but we're all still talking about sustainability and have some really clear environmental targets. The transportation piece is still very clear, and it's reflected in the co-leads. So I wanted to say I'm quite happy with this. I see some really clear priorities emerging already, some of which we've started to move on. And I was going to just say I'd be thrilled to move the recommendation.
Certainly, Councillor McKinnon has seconded it, and Councillor Salisbury, did you have comments?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I wasn't going to say anything, but I was quite pleased with this process. I was really impressed with how we started with the community plan. I was really impressed with the outreach to our staff. I was really impressed with the work that we did. This is a comprehensive, far-reaching document that's trying to herd a lot of cats together. So if there's a few strays, then so be it. I think we've done a fantastic job. I wanted to say thank you.
Great, thank you very much. After the vote is taken, I just have a little bit of a follow-up as well, just from a procedural point of view. So again, thank you before I call the vote. Really appreciate it. Great work, and great work all around from council too, so thank you. All right, I'm going to call the vote. Vote's active, everybody. Great, and that passes. Thank you. Just in regards to this, it's an important moment, actually, of, I would say, the word unity, to be able to express to not only ourselves from an internal point of view, but to the external, the citizens we represent. A moment where we have staff have created a board here where we can sign our name to this to make a mark, to put a stake in the ground that this is something that we believe in. And so just right after council is finished, after adjournment, I would really appreciate all of council, voted for it or not, to consider coming up and along with staff, just to be able to show our appreciation to staff. And then at the same time, as we sign our name to this, we're showing that direction to the citizens that we represent. So stick around, don't run away right afterwards if you wouldn't mind. Okay, bylaws, Councillor Salisbury, you are up, my friend. Thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, that bylaws number 2019-20431 to 2019-20434 inclusive are hereby passed as amended.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Goller. Appreciate that. Anything on these at all, or nothing? Okay, I'm going to just call the vote on that. Vote's active. Thank you very much. And I have no announcements at this time. Motion to adjourn. Councillor Billings, seconded by Councillor McKinnon. Yes? Okay. Let me see those hands. Thank you very much. I saw the hands on that side. What about this side of the room? You want to go home? All right, there you go. So thank you very much. If you could all join me down here in the middle of the council chambers with this board, that would be great. Thank you very much.